Is laughter the best medicine?
For actual COVID-19? No. For the COVID blues that 7 billion people have been feeling lately? Possibly.
Hassan and Doja are hoping to bring some levity to Canadians in the midst of a pandemic.
I have 4 kids. I love 3 of them. You know, it's not a law. It's not a law. You don't have to love them all.
Ali Hassan is the comedian. He's also an actor and CBC radio host on Canada Reads and Laugh Out Loud. Asif Doja is the doctor.
We'll be talking about serious topics in an unserious way.
A pediatric neurologist at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. The two have been friends since childhood. I was curious about how medicine and comedy combine in a podcast, so we sat down and chatted about it. Asif, Ali, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Just 3 guys formerly from New Brunswick hanging out on the National. And actually, Ali, your connection in New Brunswick to Asif is how your friendship began.
Absolutely. I mean, you would know this world. Ian, in the 70s, not a lot of, the way my father tells me, he would say that anybody with any dark skin, my mother and father would be like, one of us, Guyanese, one of us, Lebanese, one of us, a white guy with a bit of a tan, one of us. So it was like just anything to find a connection with people from home. And so it stood to reason that Asif's dad, who was from India, and my father, who was from Pakistan, really forged a great connection, and it's continued to this to now.
It is an interesting time in terms of entertainment, and people are creating podcasts with very niche audiences in mind. And Asif, you're getting a sense in among medical people of who some of those people are in your audience.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot from medical people, and even just hearing from some of the frontline people who you think that the last thing they'd want to do is hear a medical podcast, but obviously they're coming for the comedy on Ali's side and the entertainment side of his. But even just talking to them, they say, the people who've been in the COVID ICU, at the end of the day, we've gotten some messages from people saying, just me driving home, listening to this, putting a smile on my face, laughing, that little bit of levity kind of goes a long way.
So comedian and doctor, obviously you approach your podcast from that perspective. But Ali, one of my favorite episodes so far is when you've been talking about people of certain ethnicities playing roles of other ethnicities and how that might sometimes be acceptable. So as I listened to that, I thought each of you're bringing to this conversation also your backgrounds and your perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, we're intricately tied to our own identity and our background. There's no getting around that. And while we may not be the most Indian or the most Pakistani, either of us, there's no doubt we were raised with those various values and beliefs. So that definitely feeds into it. And that episode you're talking about is very close to my heart, because we talk about this whole idea of acting and who is allowed to play which roles. And I have played the roles of many Arabs and Middle Eastern characters because that's kind of what I look like. I don't look like your typical Pakistani. So if I was only allowed to play the roles that I look like, I may not have a career.
And I think we're caught, the 3 of us are caught in this weird generation, right? There was a time where there was no brown people or really people of any ethnic origin on TV. And now we see a plethora, but we saw that change over time. And how do you relate to it when, we're just lucky to be represented now because we can remember a time when we weren't, and how that plays in. So it's so hard to separate that from just our regular talk about entertainment.
Asif, let me ask you about your role as a doctor in all of this. You're a scientist, you're a specialist, and then you take on topics like colon cancer, for example. I mean, that's a lot of pressure for you. And so tell me about how you approach that.
Yeah, and I think I really feel a need to make sure I try and do the research. I know everybody says that in social media these days, do the research, but I mean really pulling up the scientific guidelines, reviews, and things like that, because I want to make sure I'm representing it properly. But on the other hand, I don't want to get too deep in the woods with the stuff that only other physicians care about, because even though we have physicians listening to the podcast, the majority of people who are listening to the podcast are just everyday people who just want to learn a bit more about these subjects.
And when he does get too deep into the woods, that's where I come in to be like, buddy, you're talking a lot of ding, ding, bing, bing, and I don't understand any of it. I'm the layperson. I'm I'm the stereotypical layperson, and I represent all the lay of the land.
You'll pull me back and say, you're not even explaining that properly. Let's rewind and do that again.
Ali, I think you've probably heard this over the years. Everybody thinks they can be a comedian and just go to amateur night and be okay. And Asif, no insult intended. I know you did have a little foray on amateur night. But now I think everybody thinks they can do a podcast, Ali. And so what's your advice to doctors out there, to teachers, to police officers who say, hey, you know what? Good idea. I think I'm going to do a podcast as well.
Yeah, I think if I can say something encouraging in this moment, it's don't do it. We don't need the competition. Okay, let it end with Asif and I. No, if you feel like you have a niche idea and something that people would love to hear about it, I mean, more and more people are having podcasts, putting them on, but more and more people are listening to podcasts also.
Now, Asif, Ali is a bit like me. He and I have never seen a microphone or a stage we didn't like. What about for you? What has the podcast experience been like?
Yeah, it's definitely a learning curve. We've had this idea for actually several years, and we didn't actually put it into effect last spring because of obvious reasons, because of the pandemic. We thought no one's going to want to hear a medicine podcast or entertainment. So we kind of put it on hold. And then this year started to kind of get a bit more, work on it.
Last word on this, Ali?
Well, I think, we've said a fair amount about this. We've touched on it, but I think, and Asif would 100% agree with me, it's important to remember that laughter really is the best medicine.
Yeah, just to be clear, Ian, that's not scientifically proven at all. So,
what a buzzkill.